How long does it take to get better at singing? So this is a very common question when it comes to learning how to sing. I mean, why wouldn't we want to know? If we knew how long it would take how to sing, maybe I can then make a decision on if it's even worth it for me to invest my time and energy. And whilst it can be a tricky question, in today's episode, I'm going to break down some general timelines, some general kind of expectations when it comes to getting better at singing, just based on my experience coaching singers from absolute beginner to some people who actually have a bit more experience as well. And then I'll share some pointers right at the end that might help you see this question from a completely different angle. So make sure to stay to the end. Now, real quick, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ivan. I'm a voice teacher who works with students from all around the world over Zoom. And really on this channel, on this show, my goal is to make learning how to sing as simple and as easy as possible. So if that is up your lane, consider subscribing wherever you're joining me from. And if you're looking to take your singing further, you're like, hey, I want to kind of improve my voice faster, check out some of the links down in the description below. I've got ways to work with me privately, and then also some self-study programs that you can work through at your own pace. Last but not least, if you want to inspire our next episode, just like today's episode, then drop a question or let me know down in the comments what you want me to talk about. Let's dive right in. So the first thing I need to acknowledge is this question of how long does it take to get better? It's kind of like asking me how long is a string. It frankly is a pretty hard question to answer because there's a lot of variables that can affect this. Like, what do you define as better singing? What sort of work are you putting in? Are you consistent with your practice? What's your kind of work ethic like? And are you getting the right guidance? Are you getting the right information to actually improve your voice? However, this is the boring answer. This is the one that you probably don't want to hear. And so what I can do for you today is I'll share a general timeline based off my experience working with students around the world. And then I'll also share some examples from specific students, since you know where you're at and it can give you a better idea of how long it might take for you. Let's start here with a general timeline. Let's say for the average beginner, someone who's just started to sing, and let's just say maybe you don't have any prior experience, how long does it take to sound better or at least feel like you know what you're doing? And so on average, when I'm working with my students, I'd say it takes about 3 months. 3 months of weekly lessons with me to see some really tangible progress and to also feel like you know what you're doing. This is why with my students, I often structure programs or private lessons in blocks of 3 so you can really feel that progress. And so what might help you picture this even better, I'm going to share with you a very typical 3-month plan for some of my newer students. And this can show you this kind of changes, the kind of progress you could expect over a 3-month block. Now, in month 1, typically what happens is we are introducing and developing a lot of the fundamentals. I often start here because I find that for a lot of students, just really understanding the fundamentals can take you 80% of the way with your singing. And, these are things like, learning how to isolate the stretching mechanism of your voice. How does it actually feel like to stretch your voice and change pitches? Then learning how to connect your chords and the feeling of connection as well, because that's what gives your voice power. Learning how to keep your throat a bit more relaxed. These fundamentals are things that we tackle on top of some of the more musical fundamentals, which is being able to sing on pitch and on time. And so in month 1, we'll be running through some simple scales to help you understand what that feels like. And then usually we'll bring it to a song at the end. Now, for my more advanced students here, some of you might be thinking, I don't need to do fundamentals. I'm good. I've got the basics down. This is probably not the case. I found that in my experience, some of my more pro students, people who are recording, people who are gigging, I find it very useful to revisit some of the fundamentals, especially if you're singing right now and you seem to be running into that same recurring problem, maybe a bit of strain on some of the high notes, or maybe a bit pitchy. I find that revisiting these fundamentals often solves that problem as well. And so whether we're a beginner or whether we are a bit more advanced, I find that month 1 tends to be about building your voice from ground up with those fundamentals. Now, this leads us into month 2, which is basically applying these fundamentals throughout the voice. In month 1, we've introduced these fundamentals. You got a good hang of it. You know what you're kind of doing. But then month 2 is where we start bringing it to some harder variations, or maybe to parts of your range where you're not as comfortable, and about drilling those same fundamentals in. Things like adding more repeats, adding sustains, going higher with the scales. All of this can start to help your voice become more capable because you're now applying the fundamentals to all areas of your voice. And the difference with some of my more advanced students is we'll just try even harder kind of variations, some more complex kind of scales to really help you build that control in your voice. And in this month, we're also spending a bit more time working through some songs. Now, month 3 is where we start to tie things together, which is you've now got a good idea of the fundamentals, you know how to stretch the voice, you know how to keep them together. Now that your voice is feeling easier, it feels easier to use, we want to start helping you sound good in the context of a song. And so usually in month 3, we'll spend a lot of time working through songs. I often have like recording sessions with my students, and we train in this idea of singing into the pocket. Now, I've talked about this in previous episodes, so make sure to check it out if you haven't heard this term before. But basically, it's about helping you make the right stylistic choices to sound good in a song and have it feel good as well. For some of my more advanced students, we'll simply just choose harder songs. And so this is a very loose timeline that I see from a typical journey of my students. What I thought I'd do now is let's dive into some more specific examples so you can kind of hear, some of the transformations, but then you can also kind of tailor it to yourself because not all of you are going to be starting from the same spot. Okay, so the first example I've got here is from a student called Justin, and this is one of his transformations. Check it out.
Baby, I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms, barefoot on the grass, listening to our favorite song. When you said you looked a mess, I whispered underneath my breath, baby, I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms, barefoot on the grass, listening to our favorite song. When you said you looked a mess, I whispered underneath my breath, you heard.
Okay, so this transformation, as you can see from the title, was about a month. And no, I did not, train Justin from scratch. As you can tell, he was already a pretty decent singer when he first started, right? Had a lot of cool things that he was doing with his voice. All I had to do was show him the approach to his high notes and then also work out some of those bad habits. And it literally took us about four lessons to get to this point. Now, here is another example, and this is from a student of mine, John.
In your satin dress, in your long hair, you were crazy as hell and I didn't even care. Took the midnight train to Birmingham. You had a one-track mind, you were just like mine. We were set on the world, leaving it far, far behind. Ooh, far, far behind. Had my FM station on the outskirts, blue jeans after years of shift work are fading out like I always knew they would. The strings on this guitar, the first love lost on a young heart, those things are gonna break after the getting's good.
As you can see, he went from a place where his pitch was a bit all over the place to being much, much tighter in the second clip. And this transformation took about 4 to 5 months. Okay, so here you go. I've shared some general timelines. I've also shared some very specific examples to show you the kind of progress that you can expect, especially when you're working with me one-on-one. Now, the last point I really want to make here is shifting your focus. Because whilst I really get this question, and this is common, I've asked this myself, I think it's really important for us to dive a bit deeper and ask, why is it actually important for me to know the answer to this question? And also, why not change your focus here? I mean, the real goal here is getting better at singing. And I mean, if it took, say, 6 months instead of 3 months, is that really a big difference in the grand scheme of things? And so whether it takes 3 months, 5 months, 6 years, 12 years, it's hard to say. But what I can encourage you here is focus on the things that you can actually control. And what you can control here is simply 2 things. The first one here being your input. What is the work that you're actually putting in to improve your voice? It's kind of like growing a plant, right? The input you can give to a plant is watering it, giving it the fertilizer, giving the love that it needs, putting it out in the sun. That's all you can really do. You can't really force the plant to grow faster. You can't just kind of shout at it and tell it to grow faster. All you can do is give it the right input and it will surely grow into the plant that you want it to be. And so when it comes to practicing, are you practicing consistently? Are you practicing deliberately? Are you getting feedback from a good teacher? Are you really getting that right feedback so you're not just cycling around and around and wasting time? These are the things that you can actually control. Now, the second thing here is keeping a long-term perspective. When you can kind of see change or when you can kind of see your voice in a longer term perspective versus like a week or 2 days, you start to be a bit more patient with the process. And a quote that really highlights this and it stuck with me is, people tend to overestimate what they can do in the short term and they underestimate what they can do in the long term. And in the context of singing, right, maybe, in the next day, the next week, the next month, you're putting in practice, you're kind of doing the work right, and you're not really seeing any changes. But sure enough, on a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years kind of basis, you will see the results that you want. Team, that is a wrap on today's episode. Hopefully you found some value out of this episode, and hopefully it's put this question to bed. How long does it take to actually get better at singing? If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to do all that usual social media stuff, like, comment, subscribe. That would really, really mean the world to me, and it can help these videos reach even more people. And if you're on the podcast, leaving a 5-star review would also be amazing. It would really mean the world to me. Also, if you're feeling stuck with your voice, remember, you don't have to do this on your own. Having a voice teacher can really, really save you time. If you're interested in working with me, check out some of the links down in the description below. Apart from that, my name is Ivan. I'm your voice teacher, and I'll see you every single Thursday or Friday, depending on where you're joining me from. Take care.